Okay, so tonight we are in a courtroom and you all are the jury, and this is the trial of Pontius Pilate. So we're going to pretend to bring the prisoner in, and the judge says, state your name. He says, Pontius Pilate. And he says, what was your position? And he's acting all big and bad. He says, the Roman governor of Judea and Samaria, Emperor Tiberius, appointed me as procurator of the Judean province. And then the judge says, did you know a man named Jesus? And then he gets humble real quick. He drops his head and he says, yes. And then he starts washing his hands. And the judge says, well, how did you know him? And he says, those Jews, those chief priests, elders, they bound him up and brought him to me. They were just jealous of him. And the judge says, well, what was their charge against him? And he says that he said he was a king. They kept on and on accusing him. He didn't say one word back to them. I couldn't believe it. Then the judge says, well, did you question him yourself? And Pilate says, yes, I asked him if he was the king of the Jews. He said he was. Then the judge says, well, did you believe he was innocent? And I think Pilate would say, yes, I knew he was. Read it. It's recorded. Read about it. And so let's look. Let's look at the evidence. So we're going to first look at Matthew chapter 27, verse 24.
When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See you to it.
Okay, so Pilate took a basin of water. He washed his hands before the crowd. He said, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. So that's what we're going to determine tonight, if he was innocent. And he called Jesus this just person. Okay, next we're going to look at Luke chapter 23, verse 4.
Then said Pilate to the chief priests and to the people, I find no fault in this man.
Okay, so Pilate had asked Jesus, art thou the king of the Jews? And Pilate said, and Jesus said, thou sayest it. And Pilate went out and told the chief priests and the people, I find no fault in this man. And next we're going to look at Luke chapter 23, verse 13 and 14.
And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, said unto them, You have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people. And behold, I, having examined him before you, have found no fault in this man, touching those things whereof ye accuse him.
Okay, so Pilate had sent Jesus to Herod. And what had Jesus called Herod before? What animal, remember?
Fox.
Yeah, fox. So Pilate sent Jesus to Herod. He came back, and Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, and he said, I have examined him and have found no fault in this man according to those things that you have accused him of. So next we're going to look at Luke chapter 23, verse 22.
The third time, why, what evil hath he done? I have found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go.
So Pilate was wanting to release a prisoner. He had Barabbas, who was a thief, a murderer, an insurrectionist, and then he had Jesus. And the crowd picked Barabbas. And what did they say to do with Jesus?
Crucify him.
Crucify him. Crucify him. And Pilate said the third time, why? What evil hath he done? He said, I have found no cause of death in him. And the next one we'll look at is John chapter 19, verse 4.
Pilate therefore willing to release Jesus spake again to them.
Okay.
I don't know, is that me?
Behold, I bring him forth to you, that ye may know that I find no fault in him.
Okay. So Jesus had been scourged. He had been whipped. He had been beat. He had been smacked, spit upon, mocked. And Pilate brought him out, and he said, behold, I bring him forth to you, that ye may know that I find no fault in him. And so then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns, wearing a purple robe. He has blood running down his face, running down his body. And Pilate says, look at the man, behold the man. But you couldn't even recognize that he was a man. And then those chief priests saw him, and look at what they said. So somebody read John 19:6.
When the chief priests therefore and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate saith unto them, Take ye him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him.
Okay. So Pilate said, you take him and crucify him, because I find no fault in him. So the question was, do you believe he was innocent? And let's look at the evidence. Pilate called him this just person. I find no fault in this man. Have found no fault in this man. I have found no cause of death in him. I find no fault in him. I find no fault in him. So, next question. Pontius Pilate, did you want to release him? And I think Pilate would say, yes, I did. Look it up. It's down there too. It's recorded too. So, somebody look at Mark chapter 15, verse 9.
But Pilate answered them, saying, Will you that I release unto you the King of the Jews?
Okay, so this was when Pilate had both of the prisoners, Barabbas and Jesus, and he was asking them which one they wanted him to release. And he said, Will you that I release unto you the King of the Jews? So he was saying, don't you want me to release unto you the King of the Jews? But they cried out at once, and they said, Away with this man, away with this man, release unto us Barabbas. Okay, now somebody read Luke chapter 23, verse 20.
Pilate, therefore, willing to release Jesus, spake again to them.
Okay, so it says Pilate, willing to release Jesus, spoke again to them, but they cried out more, Crucify him, crucify him. Now somebody read John 19:12.
And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar.
Okay, so Pilate was questioning Jesus, and Jesus told him, Those that delivered me to you, they have the greater sin. And it said from that point on, Pilate sought to release him. And then the last one is Acts chapter 3, verse 13.
The God of Abraham, and of Isaac, and of Jacob, the God of our fathers, hath glorified his Son Jesus, whom ye delivered up, and denied him in the presence of Pilate, when he was determined to let him go.
So this is Peter's second sermon after the day of Pentecost. Peter was preaching to the Jews about Jesus. He said, you delivered him up and you denied him in the presence of Pilate when he was determined to let him go. Okay? So next question, Pontius Pilate, why didn't you release him? Then I think he would just drop his head and start washing his hands again. So he gave us no answer, so let's look at the evidence. So somebody read Mark chapter 15, verse 15.
And so Pilate, willing to content the people, released Barabbas unto them, and delivered Jesus, when he had scourged him, to be crucified.
So it says Pilate, willing to content the people, released Barabbas and delivered Jesus to be scourged. So somebody read Luke chapter 23, verses 23 and 24.
And they were instant with loud voices, requiring that he might be crucified. And the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required.
So Pilate told them that he would chastise Jesus and let him go. But then the crowd went crazy. They were instant with loud voices, requiring that he might be crucified. And their voices prevailed. Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. So he did what they wanted. And it said the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed. So next we'll look at John chapter 19, verse 8.
When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid.
Okay. So the Jews told Pilate, they said, "We have a law, and by our law he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God." When Pilate heard that, he was the more afraid. And so now, Pontius Pilate, we want to look at the evidence and trace your steps the morning in question. So everybody turn over to John chapter 18. Somebody read verse 29.
Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? Is that right?
So the Jews brought Jesus bound up to Pilate, and it says Pilate then went out and he said unto them, What accusation do you bring against this man? And then he said, Take him and judge him according to your own law. Now somebody read verse 33.
Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again, and called Jesus, and said unto him, Art thou the King of the Jews?
Okay. So then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again. He questioned Jesus. So he had the Son of God one-on-one talking to him. And Jesus told him about his kingdom. Jesus told him about truth. Now somebody read verse 38.
Pilate said unto him, What is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews and said unto them, I find in him no fault at all.
So Pilate said, What is truth? And he had the truth sitting right in front of him. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So Pilate went out again. Now somebody read John chapter 19, verse 1.
Then Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him.
So Pilate took Jesus back into the judgment hall to scourge him. Now somebody read 19:4.
Pilate therefore went forth again, and said unto them, Behold, I bring him forth to you, that you may know that I find no fault in him.
Okay, so Pilate went forth again, so he went back out again. And he brought Jesus out for them to see what he looked like after they had scourged him. They saw him, they said, Crucify him, crucify him. And that's when Pilate was the more afraid. Now somebody read 19:9.
And went again into the judgment hall, and saith unto Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer.
So Pilate went again into the judgment hall. And last one, 19 verse 13.
When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the pavement, but in the Hebrew, Gabbatha.
Okay, so he brought Jesus forth. So let's look at Pilate's steps. He went out, and he entered into the judgment hall again, and he went out again. He took Jesus back into the judgment hall. He went forth again, went back out, went back into the judgment hall, and then he brings Jesus forth to the pavement, to the judgment seat. So we see Pilate going in and out constantly. And so, Pontius Pilate, before you released Barabbas, you asked a very important question. You said, What shall I do then with Jesus, which is called Christ? So Pontius Pilate, what did you do with Jesus? And then he would have to say, I delivered him to be crucified. And so now the court will now reach a verdict. So jury, do you believe that Pontius Pilate believed Jesus was innocent?
Yes.
Okay. Did he want to release him?
Yes.
Okay, so why didn't he?
The people.
Pressure.
People, pressure? Okay. So, Pontius Pilate, we have now reached our verdict. So, Pontius Pilate, Roman governor of Judea and Samaria, procurator of the Judean province. You were supposed to be a strong Roman judge of justice, but you were a weak coward. So, jury, what do you find him, innocent or guilty? Hold up your signs. Okay. All right. So, Pontius Pilate, you were afraid, and you cared more about what man thought than what God thought. You loved the praise of men more than the praise of God. And it is recorded that you were willing to content the people. You gave them what they required. You were willing to release him, but you didn't have the courage to do it. And tracing your movements of going in and out, back and forth, taking Jesus in and out, it appears that you were under conviction. You had the word right in front of you. You had the word, you heard the word from the word himself. You had the Son of God, the Savior of the world, right in front of you, talking to you, giving you opportunity after opportunity to accept him. And you thought you were the judge, and he was on trial, but he's the judge, and you were on trial. And you tried and tried to escape from answering your own question, what shall I do then with Jesus, which is called Christ? But that is a question everyone must answer for themselves, and you gave your answer, let him be crucified. So Pontius Pilate, the court finds you guilty of the blood of this just man.
Amen.
There'd be a lot